Hello, everybody. This is Joe with Carbon Marine. Today, I want to touch on something that I don't think anybody's ever talked about as it pertains to push poles. You don't always think about portability and adaptability when you think of a push pole. Everybody, when they hear the word push pole, they think of very long objects, fragile, expensive, and quite frankly, not very portable. I can't tell you how many times people have come into the shop here and I've got their push pole on our build out table and they look at it and they go, wow, that thing looks really, really long, because it's a mental perspective of how big it is relative to the other smaller things in the room, because push pole is usually the longest thing in a room. Well, with the advent of travel and now that the world's gone back to somewhat normal and we don't have travel restrictions, people are traveling to remote locations, and a lot of these remote locations, whether it be Cuba or LATAM, Latin America, or Central America, you go to these remote locations and there's just not push poles. It's really difficult for those guides and those lodges to obtain push poles. I supply some push poles to some of those lodges. So what I've seen evolve over the last probably 4 or 5 years, post pandemic, was people are wanting to travel. They're wanting to go to remote locations and they need a push pole. So what does that mean to the push pole industry? Well, it means we had to adapt. And by adapting, you have to come up with ways to get a long push pole into these remote locations. So we offer a product that we call the Carbon Marine Traveler. And then what makes the Carbon Marine Traveler possible is this rather simple but effective ferrule system. It's metal. The early versions of this were T6061 aluminum. I used aluminum in the early versions because it was light. One of the drawbacks of T6061 aluminum is that aluminum is soft. So if you're going to duty cycle or thread and unthread, thread and unthread frequently, that T6061 aluminum wears out and the joint fails. It doesn't stay threaded anymore. So to get around that, or to adapt, going on the theme of adaptation here, I upgraded to 3/16 stainless. So this stuff is tougher than a $2 steak from a gas station. It's not going to rust, but they are more durable. Now, why is this particular ferrule important to the Traveler push pole? Well, this is what allows you to take a Magnum 59-inch section, 57-inch section, and bond it. And now you can build a pole with two sections, approximately 10 foot. You can add another 57-inch section, which would make it approximately 14 and some change. You can add another one to take it up to maybe 20 foot. So now you've got the ability, and we have a seamstress here close to us that can make a Sunbrella canvas case to put it in. One of the more popular stories is I had a famous person, I'm not going to dox who it was, but he called me. I recognized who he was. And he says, hey, I live in New York. I got a drift boat, and we fish this particular area, and sometimes we can't row. It's a traditional drift boat, but we need to be able to move around. So we need a push pole, but we don't have any way to stow it or to mount it to the boat in the traditional sense. So I said, great, we'll use the Traveler and we'll put it in a canvas bag for you. And that gives you the functionality and the adaptability to take that out of the bag, twist it together, pole where you need to pole to get in. They were poling for bedding smallmouth. And that gave him the adaptability of being able to use a push pole in a non-traditional push pole environment, which was upstate New York. You don't think of poling in upstate New York, but I sell a lot of poles in that area that are of that style, that Traveler style. So let's talk about what a Traveler's not good for. If you've got a traditional saltwater flat skiff with traditional push pole holders, whether they be V-Marines or Stiffies or Acons or whatever, you do not want to use a Traveler, because a traditional push pole mount system has 3 moments of contact. It has a hook in the front, a hook in the middle, and a hook in the back. Well, those hooks are going to grab the 3 center sections, and sometimes 2 center sections, and that means the outer 2 sections are going to be unencumbered. They're not going to be captured. So what happens with vibration and running is these things can thread apart. They can come apart while you're running, and then it causes a problem because you lose one of them. So you don't want to buy a Traveler if you're going to use it in a traditional push-pull scenario. You buy the Traveler, and this is the question I always call the customer. I see order come in that I don't know the person. I call them and say, tell me what you're trying to accomplish. And it all goes back to one simple question. If you're traveling into somewhere and you need to travel out of somewhere and you need a push-pull in a small bag to be able to get in, expand it out into a full-size pole, then break it back down and get out, the Traveler's for you. If you're not in that situation, go with a traditional push-pull. It's going to save you money and it's going to save you frustration. So this is our Traveler ferrule. And just for comparison, this is a traditional bond-in ferrule. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference in surface area. That's important because with the Traveler configuration, you're giving up some durability. This allows you to have more bond surface as the pole is assembled permanently and the energy gets distributed across a larger area, so it's more durable. This push-pull, a Traveler fully assembled, if this push-pull gets put under an extreme load or bent or radiused, it's going to crack the tubing here because this steel doesn't flex. So that load is going to get transferred and it's going to cause that tubing to crack and come off. So you have to understand that when you buy the Traveler, you're gaining a huge advantage of being able to travel in, travel out. You're adapting to the restraints or constraints of your situation, but you have to give up a little bit of the durability component and be particularly careful about how much load you put on that push-pull. You want that pole to stay straight. If that pole gets bent, it's going to crack where this ferrule goes into the tubing. And I just like to point that out because it's easier to explain and set expectations on the front end than after you've had an accident and you're disappointed and you're upset because it happened because you didn't have any insight or foresight that that was a possibility. So when I see these travel orders come in, I'm pretty particular about qualifying, hey, is this really the right choice for you? And I'll walk you through those decisions if you're unaware. But if you need to get in and adapt to your environment and adapt to the type of boat you're poling, the Traveler is a fantastic choice. Now, there is one other very esoteric situation where we use, this is a Stiffy product. This is what they call their two-piece ferrule. This is an absolute nightmare to make, henceforth why I buy them from Stiffy, because I can buy them from Stiffy less expensive than it takes for me to make it. It's a great design. I've got a great relationship with them. They don't mind selling them to me. I don't mind using them. But the important part about this ferrule, it costs more than this ferrule. But it's got a lot more surface area, so it can handle a longer push-pull configuration. We don't sell these very often, but they are available for guys that need a pole, say up to 24 foot, that they need to be able to stow as a two-piece. So we would bond together a pole, but in the center joint, we would use this ferrule that would allow them to make it into, say, two 12-foot pieces, or say a 13-foot and 11-foot piece, because it's hard to get them exactly symmetrically just because of the way the tubing's designed, or the links. But this is another option. I use these, interesting enough, in cases where they're really not push-pulling, but they need a push-pull style of tube for either retrieving a drone submarine, or a submarine drone. I sold them for that application. And I've sold them for guys with big, like yachts that are using them for mooring lines to hang when they're mooring. Or one particular fellow bought 4, and they used it for pushing the ice chunks away from the bow of his yacht as he was going through the waters in Arctica. So I think that was a better choice because there's more surface area here to handle the stress of that pole being longer. So just going back to the concept of adaptability, push poles aren't binary. It's not an all one piece or nothing. You do have options. And if you've got a unique situation and you can't get clarity via Google or Grok or any of these other sources for trying to figure out what your options are, call us here at Carbon Marine, 813-284-7040. I'll sit down, spend the time with you, and walk you through the pros and the cons, because every decision has an advantage and a disadvantage. And it's important for you to understand as you tackle this adaptability question, what are the advantages of one situation, maybe cost, What are the disadvantages of another situation? Maybe durability or lack thereof, but I can help you T-account that and make a better decision about an adaptable push-pull that'll help you get into a remote location and get out in a remote location over and over again so that you're productive in your fishing experiences.